What's up guys, welcome back to your Heroclix headquarters. So it's time for Power of the Week again. I know it's been a few weeks, so I'm really sorry about that. These videos do take a lot more time and effort than my normal videos, so I promise I'm going to do a better job of actually doing Power of the Week every week from here on out. But without further ado, this week's Power of the Week is going to be Impervious. And actually, to make up for lost time, we're going to cover Invulnerability and Toughness as well. So it's going to be a 3-in-1. They all basically do the same thing, and I don't think Toughness or Invulnerability really need their own video because they're pretty basic. But of course, first, to find out what it does, we have to take a look at our handy-dandy PAC right here. We will start with Toughness. Toughness is the orange defense power, and it says simply reduce damage taken by 1. So that's easy enough to understand, hopefully, but if not, we are going to get into it in a second. Now the next power we're going to take a look at is the gray defense power, Invulnerability, and it says reduce damage taken by 2. So of course that's better than Toughness already, twice the amount of damage reduced. But the last power we're going to take a look at is Impervious. Now Impervious says reduce damage taken by 2, and when this character would take damage from an attack, you may roll a d6. On a 5 to 6, damage taken is reduced to 0. So of course that one is the best of them so far. It gives you that chance to reduce damage all the way down to 0. But let's go to the map and take a look at what these powers do in action so we can get a better idea of how they all work. And then as always, we're going to take a look at what kind of things they combo with and what their weaknesses and strengths are and what some of my favorite characters are that can use them. Alright, so as you can see here, we have the Thing, who starts with the orange defense power Toughness that reduces damage taken by 1. Then we have the Hulk that has the gray defense power Invulnerability that reduces damage taken by 2. And then we have another Thing that has the brown defense power Impervious that reduces damage taken by 2. And when you're hit with an attack, you can roll a d6, and on a 5 or 6, you reduce damage taken to 0. So now these all work pretty similarly. If the Hulk here, for instance, were to hit this Thing with Toughness, he does a 4 damage, so that would be reduced by 1 from Toughness, meaning he would then take 1, 2, 3 clicks of damage. Now if this Thing were to hit the Hulk, he does 3 damage, and the Hulk has Invulnerability. So Invulnerability reduces damage taken by 2, so if he was hit for 3 damage, he would reduce 2 of that and take 1 damage. Clicking his dial 1 time. Now that the Hulk's angry, he wants to attack this Thing. He only has a 3 damage now, so assuming he hits with his attack, he'll be dealing 3 damage to the Thing, and the Thing will then be able to roll for his Impervious since he's been hit by an attack, and getting a 5 or a 6, he will then reduce all damage dealt to 0, so he won't be taking any damage from the Hulk. Now, even if you were to roll less than a 5 or a 6, he would still reduce the damage taken by 2. So if the Hulk does 3 damage, then reducing that by 2, he would also take 1 damage. Now, one of the strengths of damage reducers like Toughness, Invulnerability, and Impervious is that they will reduce damage from everything. Impervious will get to roll to reduce it to 0 if it's from an attack, but from any other source, they will still reduce the damage by 1 or 2, respectively. So what that means basically is if the Hulk was to punch this Thing and he would take a few clicks of damage, and let's say since the Hulk has super strength, he will deal him knockback and knock him back into this wall, stopping him here. Now if the Thing still has Toughness, Invulnerability, or Impervious after taking the damage from the attack and being knocked back, he would normally be dealt 1 knockback damage for being stopped by the wall, but he will be able to reduce that damage from Toughness, Invulnerability, or Impervious. So the same thing will happen if Hulk hits him, deals him a couple clicks of damage, and then knocks him back, making him fall onto this lower elevation, will deal 2 clicks of knockback damage. So depending on what damage reducer he has at the time, if it's Toughness, he'll reduce 1 damage and still take 1 knockback damage. If it's Invulnerability or Impervious, he will not take any damage because he'll reduce it by 2. And besides knockback damage, having damage reducers is also helpful for certain characters that can use poison. Poison is just a free action that allows you to deal 1 damage to all adjacent opposing characters. So if you have Toughness or better, then you'll be able to reduce that 1 damage to nothing. Now, one thing that these damage reducers do not help against, of course, is Penetrating Blast or Exploit Weakness. Penetrating Blast being the dark blue attack power, Exploit Weakness being the light green damage power. These 2 powers deal penetrating damage, which means that they cannot be reduced. So of course their main purpose is to cut through the defenses of characters with big damage reducers like Invulnerability and Impervious. To be able to still deal a 4 damage through the Hulk's Invulnerability is huge. Now, one thing to note about the power Impervious, even if somebody does shoot you with Penetrating Blast or hit you with Exploit Weakness and deal you penetrating damage, you are still allowed to roll for your Impervious. Now, in most cases, it's not going to matter. Even if you roll a 5 or 6, damage dealt is penetrating, so you can't reduce it to 0. For instance, if somebody had a special Impervious that said if they were to roll a 5 or 6, they get +1 defense for the rest of the turn, you know, something weird like that, you would still be able to roll for it, so you could still potentially gain any of those random bonuses that it might bring you just to roll for it, but it would not reduce the damage since it is penetrating. Outwit is, of course, the next big weakness that these powers have, just outwitting the defense power so that anybody on your team could potentially make an attack regardless of them having a damage reducer because they would no longer have that power to reduce the damage. It could really ruin your day. It's also important to note that damage dealt from Precision Strike cannot be reduced below 1. Precision Strike is the pink attack power, so since it can't be reduced below 1, that means that even if they have Toughness, Invulnerability, or Impervious, a character with even 1 damage and Precision Strike will do 1 damage no matter what, even if you were to roll a 5 or a 6 on your Impervious. Impervious would attempt to reduce it to 0, but Precision Strike can't be reduced below 1. Another thing that having Toughness, Invulnerability, or Impervious will not protect you from is the Mystic's team ability. So characters with the Mystic's team ability on their base will deal 1 penetrating damage to any opposing character that hits them. So if the Hulk was to hit Shazam here with the Mystic's team ability, he would deal his damage and then he would also take 1 penetrating damage for having dealt him damage. Again, because this is penetrating damage, it can't be reduced. The other thing to watch out for with your big damage reducing defense powers is Pulse Wave. Pulse Wave being the yellow attack power. Pulse Wave, of course, saying that nothing within the range of it can use any powers or abilities, includes your damage reducers. So whether they're multi-targeting or even single-targeting your big damage-reducing character, watch out for Pulse Wave because your damage reducers will not help you from that either. Now the final type of damage I want to talk about is pushing damage. The only way to ignore pushing damage is from having willpower or Indomitable. Now, the Hulk does have the Indomitable symbol on his base there, the shield with a line through it, but if we pretend that he didn't, and he was to be given a second action token, then after action is resolved, he would be dealt 1 pushing damage. If he didn't have Indomitable, and you only had something like Toughness, Invulnerability, or Impervious, none of those would help you reduce that damage, because pushing damage is its own type of damage for being given a second action token, and you cannot reduce that by any means other than willpower. As well as any powers or effects that say to deal a character unavoidable damage cannot be reduced by Toughness, Invulnerability, or Impervious. Unavoidable damage is just that. It's unavoidable. There's nothing you can do about it. You can't use super senses or shape change or impervious or anything against it. It is unavoidable and it will deal you damage. Alright, so now that we know all about the strengths and weaknesses of Toughness, Invulnerability, and Impervious, I want to show off some of my favorite characters that can use all of those powers. So to start us off here, we have the mighty Iron Man in the Destroyer armor coming out of the Forge, looking super awesome. The main reason I like this guy is on his special defense power, Mighty Armor. Iron Man can use Impervious, but reduces the damage to 0 on a result of 4 to 6. And when Iron Man is targeted with Penetrating Psychic Blast, damage dealt to him is not penetrating damage. This power cannot be countered. So essentially that gives you Protected Outwit on that power. They can't outwit it. They can't Penetrating Blast through it. And you have a 50-50 chance of rolling it to reduce the damage to 0, which is super awesome. Sadly, he only has it on his first click, but he is a very strong Iron Man nonetheless. And the next one we have over here is the Chase Thor Buster from the Mighty Thor set. This guy is super awesome and has a very interesting Toughness special. Normally you don't give Toughness anything good, but in this guy's case, his special defense power gives him Toughness, and other characters using Quake, Energy Explosion, or Running Shot deal no damage to Thor Buster. So what's interesting about that is if he's grouped up with a bunch of friendly characters, he's not going to take any damage from Quake or Energy Explosion. So you can't like Running Shot Penetrating Blast him, or even just Running Shot him with a regular big attack or anything like that. It's pretty effective. You could still Running Shot Pulse Wave him because it would ignore it. But you know, he has Running Shot Pulse Wave too, so there's that. He's pretty awesome. And speaking of Running Shot Pulse Wave, Hulkbuster Mark II also starts with that, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. Because he also starts with the special defense power, Hulkbuster Mark II can use Impervious. If he would still take more than 2 damage, at once he takes 2 damage instead. This power can't be countered or ignored. So that's the old rules way of saying this is Protected Outwit and Protected Pulse Wave. So they can't ignore this with Pulse Wave. They can't outwit it. Even if they were to try to Penetrating Blast it, they can't do more than 2 damage to him. So it's very strong, and he opens with a crazy 20 defense on his full 500 point line. A couple of other great Impervious figures are the new Uncommon Thing. For only 50 points, he's got a special defense power, Impervious. When the thing uses it and succeeds during a close attack after resolutions, deal the attacker 1 penetrating damage. So that's really cool. When he succeeds against a close attack, they like hurt their hand trying to punch him. It's pretty awesome. And once per turn, when the thing would roll a 4 for Impervious, you can roll again. So, you know, getting a potential second chance on your Impervious is always great. Combine that with some great stats and powers as well as Indomitable. For only 50 points, he is awesome. And the next one I have over here is the convention exclusive Rogue wielding Mjolnir. She's got a special defense power there that she can use Impervious, and when Rogue is dealt damage by an attack, with an attack roll of 8 or less after resolutions, heal her 1 click. So you gotta make sure you pay attention to what your opponent's rolling against her, because if they roll an 8 or less and she lands somewhere in the middle there, then she's gonna be able to heal a click, which is pretty cool. So I like her a lot for that. But moving on, some other cool Marvel characters that have some neat damage reducing abilities are this Rock Slide here from the X-Men Xavier School set. He has this special damage power here that gives him Toughness and Invulnerability, but only if Rock Slide occupies hindering terrain, Impervious, but only if he's adjacent to a piece of blocking terrain. At the beginning of your turn, if Rock Slide is adjacent to a piece of blocking terrain, heal him 1 click. So he does have that there for his entire 70-point dial. So it's really important where you put him for what kind of damage reducer he's going to have. If you can keep him adjacent to blocking, he can have Impervious and be able to heal a click, which is pretty awesome. And the next over here is Luke Cage, of course. Luke Cage having that bulletproof skin. And it shows here in his special defense power, Luke Cage can use invulnerability and willpower. Penetrating damage dealt to Luke Cage can be reduced. So for only 50 points, that is a really cool ability. He has it for the first 2 clicks there. So invulnerability that can reduce penetrating damage is similar to Invincible, but we'll talk about Invincible another day. And over here we have Kane from back in the Amazing Spider-Man set. I've always been interested by his special defense power. It's pretty cool. When Kane is hit by an attack, roll a d6 before damage is dealt. On a result of 1 to 2, he can use Toughness. On a 3 or a 4, he can use Invulnerability, and on a 5 or a 6, evade the attack. So evading the attack is what Super Senses does, but since this isn't Super Senses, then Precision Strike isn't going to come into effect if they were to have that. But it would still affect not being able to reduce the damage below 1 if, for instance, he had rolled a 3 or 4 to get Invulnerability. But it's really cool because it's just so weird that if you get Toughness, Invuln, or just dodge it as if it were Super Senses. Now on the DC side of things, of course, Superman is going to be one of your best bets for Impervious. And funny enough, they actually both start with Invincible, but have very good Impervious special defense powers. So starting off, taking a look at the Batman vs. Superman movie set, Superman can use Impervious at the beginning of your turn if Superman occupies clear outdoor terrain. Heal him of damage equal to the number of action tokens on him. So if he has 2 action tokens, I'm pretty sure he gets that power like every 3rd click. So you could potentially heal 2 clicks right back up the top dial, which is pretty awesome. And then the Trinity War Superman over here has the special defense power. Superman can use Impervious at the beginning of your turn. If Superman was damaged by an opposing character's attack since your last turn, heal him of 1 damage. So of course, just like the other Superman, being able to heal damage after being attacked is great and really adds a lot of life into his dial. And oddly enough, Kyle Rayner is actually very good with Invulnerability and Impervious. This one from the Green Lantern OP kit we got not too long ago has a bunch of special defense powers there on his dial, as you can see, that gives him Defend, Invulnerability, and Protected Outwit. So all those white defense powers give him Defend with an 18 defense, Invulnerability, and his Protected Outwit. So the only thing you really have to worry about is Penetrating Blast or Exploit Weakness or some other type of penetrating damage. But it's very solid. And this other Kyle Rayner we got from the War of Light event a while back is exceptionally good with Impervious. Now it might be cheating a little bit because it is a stop click he gets after a couple clicks of life. But as you can see there, the Ion special defense power there, when this click is revealed due to an opponent's attack, stop turning the dial. So nowadays it would say stop, but it's a little different. Kyle Rayner can use Impervious and the Quintessence team ability. This power can't be ignored. Can't be ignored is the old way of saying Protected Pulse Wave. Quintessence team ability is going to give you Protected Outwit on everything anyway, and gives them Impervious with a 19 defense, which is super crazy. So he starts out with Super Senses, and then after he takes a couple clicks there, he's going to go to that special Impervious power, which is super strong. This guy was so good back in the day, especially with the construct that you can add to him by paying its cost. You can give him Shape Change or Energy Shield Deflection or whatever. And then, of course, the green battery makes it even worse. So he is great with Impervious after taking a hit. And speaking of stop clicks, Stripe here from the new JLU set at his 35-point line starts out with a very interesting special defense power there, as you can see. For only 35 points, he's going to be able to use Stop, Defend, Invulnerability. So the fact that it's a stop click is still going to give him Protected Outwit and Pulse Wave for his Defend and his Invulnerability, much like Kyle Rayner we just saw, which is just really powerful, I think, for 35 points. And he's got Leadership and Perplex too, so he's really good. The only way you're going to be able to get through his defenses is with penetrating damage. And finally, we have Steel from the Rebirth set.
and he's got a special defense power, which is Impervious, free. Until your next turn, Steel can use Invulnerability instead of Impervious, and he has adjacent friendly characters modify defense +1. And then, of course, he's also got this funny trait that when he's hit with a close attack, after resolutions, deal the attacker 1 penetrating damage, pretty similar to the thing that we looked at earlier. So it's just really cool that he's got Impervious, but you can choose to downgrade it to Invulnerability in order to up the defenses of all your friendly characters. It's a very interesting special defense power, and he's got it for like the first good chunk of his dial there too, which is pretty good. But yeah, he's really cool. And for fun, I of course like to try and look at a universe outside of Marvel and DC. Striker Eureka here starts with regular Impervious, but he does get a special defense power later on that gives him Impervious, but reduces damage to 0 on a result of 4 to 6. And so he has some form of Impervious or Super Impervious throughout his whole dial. And then Cherno Alpha here starts with a special defense power that gives him Impervious, but when the result of its d6 roll is a 3 or a 4, it reduces damage dealt by 3 instead. So sometimes that's enough to reduce damage dealt to 0, you know what I mean? Sometimes they only have a 3 damage, so there's potentially good odds that 3 through a 6 will be able to save him from taking any damage, which is pretty awesome. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you smash that like button for me, but also make sure you guys let me know in the comments what powers you want me to go over on a future Power of the Week, because that's what this is all about. I'm doing this for you guys, so let me know what you want to see. And don't forget to click that subscribe button so you don't miss a video. But until next time, thank you guys so much for watching. This has been Heroclix Headquarters, signing off.